The third trap we often see with investment real estate owners is the trap of the day-to-day. I'm Alex Stavorowski with Impact 1031 and Ridgegate Financial. Over the last few years, we've talked with thousands of real estate investors dealing with the same problems we'll discuss today. Often this presents itself in a way that somebody's been having their head down, managing properties, doing everything they can to make that investment as strongly performing as possible, and by the time they look up, they don't know where they are, they don't know where they're going. So they've been following their feet one step after the other and doing the day-to-day, but they don't have any clear picture of the long term, and trying to figure that out down the road is incredibly difficult for a lot of people because they don't know what options even exist to help them to get to where they want to go. I was talking with a woman the other day who was in a very similar situation. Her whole portfolio of real estate was spread out over a couple different states, and she was trying to figure out some ways to consolidate it and help her to own some real estate or do something that allowed her to get closer to living to her family. So she has a son out in a different state with her grandson. She wanted to be closer to them. And as we've discussed, a lot of people will come in with a strategy already in mind and trying to figure out, how can I get there? You have the tools that I need to get from A to B. I already know where those both are, and I need to cross that bridge. But when we look at our framework of purpose planning portfolio, the first question to ask is, what are you actually trying to achieve? Once we have a good grasp of what somebody's trying to do with any sort of investment or opportunity, then we look at a plan. And that involves, how do you get there? How do you arrive at that purpose, and what steps are you going to have to take between now and then? The portfolio level solutions come along after that, where we've identified the plan, the steps that we need to get, we've identified where we're trying to end up, and what are the tools that we can use to do that in the most efficient way. And applying our framework to her situation started with that question of, what are you actually trying to achieve? For her, it wasn't necessarily buying a house in the mountains. It was trying to spend more time with her family, being closer to her son, to her grandson, and figuring out the best way to do that. When we looked at what kind of plans she had already come up with, the opportunity of consolidating some of these properties, getting them sold, and buying a larger property that she could use as a rental or vacation home was her top of mind. She said, well, that's an easy way to use the 1031 and be able to buy another property. But at the same time, part of her purpose was not wanting to deal with managing property and managing real estate, especially not in a location that was different from her own. And when we looked at some of the different plans that could come into place with the questions of, is this the best way to achieve your ultimate purpose? Or how can I strive towards that purpose with the plans in place and the opportunities that are available to me? Our discussion led into some greater depth of, is this actually the best way to do it? What happens if your son moves? What happens if you aren't able to rent this property for enough income that you would be maintaining your lifestyle over the long term? And for her, those questions really hit close to home because they weren't things that she had considered up to that point. It was a very simple transactional approach that she was taking, and part of the reason we were having the conversation was figuring out, what are the other tools, what are the other options available? And again, the day-to-day trap of keeping your head down and figuring out one day at a time, how do I manage this property, and making sure that it's working for me and cash flowing and the tenants are happy, is all well and good and important to be involved with. But you also need to have a scope of big picture, how am I using this for the lifestyle that I want to live? We see that very commonly with a lot of real estate investors. And for her, she didn't even know really the opportunities that were available to her to help her determine where she wanted to end up. And so a conversation then led into, well, what kind of tools do I have access to? What kind of plans can I put in place? And I'm going to use that to help me inform where I should end up. Ideally, we're generally starting at the end with the goal in mind and working backwards and building out a plan from there. But sometimes you need to know what opportunities you have available to figure out where you want to end up. And that was the case for her. So we had a much more in-depth conversation when it came to the portfolio level of tools and solutions available to help her determine, where do I actually want to take this, and how is that best going to suit my lifestyle and the goals that I have in mind. The trap of the day-to-day is one we often see with the accidental landlord or the accidental property manager, somebody that didn't have long-term intentions of getting into owning a portfolio of real estate and managing it themselves, But maybe they rented out their residence instead of selling over time, and they've done that a couple times, and now here they are with a collection of properties. But they've had their head down managing that, dealing with tenants, and trying to balance the other responsibilities that they have, that now that they've looked up and life is changing around them, they don't know where to go. They don't know how to get there, and that's where we would encourage you to book a call with us and discuss your situation more specifically, because those kinds of questions are what we ask and help you to figure out, so that not only are we building out a plan, but ultimately you can strive to achieve your purpose. In summary, the traps to watch out for with your investment real estate are the trap of the status quo, the trap of retreating to fine, and the trap of the day-to-day, and losing sight of the big picture. If you think you might be falling into one of these traps, or you'd like help personalizing our framework to your situation, the best place to start is by booking a call with us. I'll put a link in the description below.